Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Athabasca Chippewa First Nation wants to block a major oil sands expansion project in Alberta. Syncrude's oil sands expansion would add an extra 14 years of operation on traditional land. The First Nation has filed a submission opposing the expansion, and this week the community's leaders were in Fort McMurray for hearings on the project. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
Members of the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation entered the hearings held by the Alberta Energy Regulator with one thing on their minds: protecting the land. The First Nation is voicing its opposition to Syncrude's Mildred Lake Extension project north of Fort McMurray. The extension would allow the mine to produce 738 million barrels of bitumen and create over 1,100 construction jobs. But it would also allow Syncrude to operate on traditional land for an extra 14 years.
This project here is just going to continue to add to more problems as we are having here today. It ain't going to get any better, it's going to get worse.
Chief Alan Adam of the ACFN says Syncrude has been operating in the region for 40 years and have already had a negative impact to the land. Declining water levels, elimination of caribou and moose habitats, and contamination to the waterways.
I remember as a kid when you could drink water from the Athabasca River, you could drink water from the Athabasca Lake, or you could eat fish. I remember those days. You know, I might have been a young kid at the time, but I still remember it. But now, today, you cannot do it.
Roy Ladouceur lives off the land in Poplar Point. He says low water levels have made it difficult for transportation on winter roads.
Leave well enough alone as it is for the time being. Give Mother Nature its own space and time. Mother Nature knows best how and goes about doing its own rehabilitation, reclamation. It's all in her hands.
If approved, the oil sand mine would be in operation as soon as 2023. The hearings will continue until February 8th. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Fort McMurray.
An urban Aboriginal community group in Montreal has created an Indigenous ally toolkit. So far, they've received over 100 orders from organizations based all over Turtle Island. Tom Fenario explains.
When you first open this, you get like sort of a quick introduction as well as like boom right away. There's 3 different types of allies.
Leilani Shah is Ganyagahaga, or Mohawk, from Ganawage. She designed the recently launched Indigenous Ally Toolkit.
This toolkit is aimed at people who want to get into this work or who already are and want to become a better ally.
Created by the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Community Strategy Network, the toolkit is broken down into 3 steps that non-Indigenous people can take to have a better relationship with Indigenous people. The first step focuses on best practices for folks who feel inclined to join Indigenous causes.
There's always been a lot of white saviors who, even though they have good intentions in their mind, have done some harm in trying to help Indigenous people. And I think a huge part of allyship is examining your privileges and the space you take up.
Brooke Deere says her life spent as a Ganyagahaga woman navigating predominantly white institutions has shown her there's a greater need for education. Step 2 of the toolkit provides a breakdown of proper terms, grammar, and common misconceptions.
I think this is all information that it's not new. People have been having these conversations for a long time, but to have all this information bundled nicely together, I think was something that was really needed.
Dakota Swiftwolf helped research and write the content for the toolkit. The Ojibwe Cree woman says the toolkit aims to fill a gap in the public's knowledge of Indigenous issues.
Indigenous people deal with, I guess, being approached with these questions over and over again for their entire lives, and it definitely gets not annoying, but there's a lot of emotional burdens that go into educating non-Indigenous people.
The toolkit is currently available in both English and French and can be downloaded online. And even though it's currently Montreal-centric, copies have been ordered by over 100 organizations across Canada and the U.S.
We want to work in the future with different territories, and we're talking about that. We really want to have this throughout Canada and have it territory specific.
As for the ultimate goal of the Indigenous Ally Toolkit, It's listed in the third step. Have people absorb the knowledge within and then take action. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
A junior high school in Nova Scotia says it does not tolerate racism, and a substitute teacher's assistant recently found out that the school is serious. He made comments about residential schools to a grade 7 class, which the students immediately reported. Angel Moore has the story.
Truro Junior High is a culturally diverse school with students from town and surrounding First Nations. So, when an educator made racist remarks, everyone was shocked. JC Sillyboy was in that classroom. Her family attended residential schools.
We're reading through the textbooks, and the sub was telling us that as Natives, we need to forgive and forget what happened in the residential schools to make our future better. And he kept making comments like that.
Parents were immediately called to meet with school officials. Jolene Marr says she's impressed the school acted quickly and is working with parents to combat racism. She says education is key so people can understand what Indigenous people have endured.
I was glad that when I came to the school, the gentleman was already off the premises. More so because I probably would have liked to educate him myself.
The school board says they have programs to teach educators cultural sensitivity and to be respectful. And culturally hurtful comments are not tolerated and do not represent their values. The school's communications manager, Jennifer Rogers, says it was important to handle it swiftly.
To acknowledge the incident, to validate the students' feelings, and to restore trust and confidence and safety back in the school.
Students' courage to speak up is also bringing safety back into the school. Sillyboy says youth need to stand up to racism and know the true history of residential schools.
We don't need to forgive and forget. We don't need to dwell on it, but we don't forget it, because that's what made us who we are, and that's what made our elders who they are.
The substitute educational assistant is being dealt with by Human Resources, and the school administration is working with parents and students to move forward. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Truro, Nova Scotia.
A new study says colonization of America by Europeans killed so many Indigenous people it actually affected the Earth's climate. Scientists say around 55 million Indigenous people were murdered at the end of the 15th century. That led to abandoned farmland about the size of France being repopulated with vegetation. The study says that ice core records show a drop in atmospheric carbon dioxide around this time, meaning the regrowth pulled enough of the CO2 from the atmosphere to chill the planet. We want to hear what you think. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. We need to take a quick break, but there's more news to come, including a ghost story from Rankin Inlet, so stay with us. Welcome back. With temperatures that plunge to -60, life in the tundra requires some pretty solid winter gear. Our reporter Charlotte Morit-Jacobs was let in on the secret to staying warm: handmade Inuit parkas. Here's the story.
Welcome to Rankin Inlet. It's a balmy -60 today with 80-kilometer Arctic winds. How does one stay warm outside? It starts inside the homes of winter gear wonders. Corrine Pilakapsi is finishing up an order for the firefighters. She is one of half a dozen seamstresses in the town sewing up a storm.
This kind of thinking is, okay, keep the line straight, make sure everything lines up, feel it, hold it. It soothes me and my soul.
Each of our parkas are custom made for different uses.
This gives less stress on the bend of your arm. A lot of people like the straight arm. I like the fuzzy for when I'm not wearing a sweater. You know how it gets tiring when there's too much here?
Like bulk there, yeah. It takes her around 4 hours for a plain parka and more for fancier styles.
I have my son's parkas where I get them to try it on, and then just holding it nicely is how I can visualize how it can fit them better.
So how can something so light be so warm? No, it's not wizardry. It's the innovative 3-layer design.
And those are the 3 layers: the commander, the hollow fill, and then the thinsulate.
Pilakapsi says her customers have no problem picking out luxurious furs and trim at the local home hardware. The biggest challenge is battling the new trend for thinner, more form-fitting parkas.
I told her it's gonna be way too small for you. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna sew this. There better be another woman that fits this because I ain't taking this apart. It just gives that hug.
Although Pilakapsi has 5 parkas for herself, she didn't learn how to sew for vanity. She sews for practicality.
This kind of look is more for
walking around.
Yeah, let's go to the store. And you can hold the bags and I'll walk beside you. It sort of came upon me where I thought, wow, if I'm ever going to be his wife or if I'm ever going to stay with him forever, I need to know how to keep him warm because he goes out hunting and I have to sew for him.
Her wares range from $500 to $600.
The Kivalek parka is so nice, you might just find yourself indoors editing APTN footage in your custom order. But can you blame me? Just look at this fox fur.
Charlotte Mark-Jacobs, APTN National News, Rankin Inlet.
Looking good, Charlotte. A Fab Lab is a place where creativity meets digital technology. If you can dream it up, it can be created. It's the brainchild of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There are over 1,200 of them worldwide and 24 of them in Canada. APTN's Todd Lamoran takes us to the only Indigenous one, the Onaki Fab Lab.
Here's some chess pieces.
Garrett White Duck Mongo gives us a tour.
We're making figurines for our board game, which is right here, actually.
He proudly shows off the Onaki Fab Lab's teamwork.
And the name of our game is called Now You Zebi, Now You Don't.
Right now it's just a prototype, but it was created with digital tools.
Turned it into a file that the laser engraver could read so that it could cut exactly what we drew. I surprised myself and about what we could do. And everyone, too, here, I think they feel the same exact way.
The youth work on individual projects in addition to a team project. Laura Mullen admits to being skeptical at first.
I had no idea that, we could have this much power over what we're doing. Everything you can possibly imagine is doable.
Celine O'Clair's concern about Indigenous high school dropout rates led her to create the Fab Lab.
Which is bringing the 21st century equipment to the youth. I thought that because of the approach, the way the Fab Lab function, that could be something that could work very well with Indigenous youth.
I know I could make something really genuine and unique as long as I know how to use the tools, which they're showing me here.
And showing how to use the tools is Pawn Thong Susanoman, the Fab Lab's instructor. She says the most important thing is gaining confidence to learn anything is possible.
That type of learning is very gratifying for them, and in return it's very gratifying for me to see that evolution in a very short time.
I'm learning so much more about myself because I was in general arts before in university, and I really wasn't happy with that. I wasn't sure where I was going, and now I have a good idea of what I'm going to do next.
And being an Indigenous Fab Lab creates a comfort zone for everyone involved.
I come here in the morning and I feel like I finally got a place for myself, and I can express myself and be myself more.
This group of Fab Labbers will finish in March. There's also plans for a mobile Fab Lab to go to remote Indigenous communities. Todd Lamran, APTN National News, Gatineau, Quebec.
It's time for another break, but I still have more news to come, so stick around. If you Google Rankin Inlet, Nunavut, you might be surprised by the findings. The hamlet is listed as one of Canada's most haunted places. Reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs was there, and she went ghost busting to find out why the Rankin Fire Hall gives some of the crew the chills.
The firefighters in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut bravely enter buildings on fire to save lives. But where they hang up their hats is another story.
During the day when I saw the ghost and we were just getting the place ready for a practice night.
Mark Happy is one of many, past and present, on the team who say they have seen ghosts.
They're just on the steps over here with the older man and that little girl.
What was going through your mind when you saw that?
And I just couldn't believe it, and we started wondering why they're showing their presence to me.
And he is very sure it was a ghost.
Because when I first saw it, I blinked my eyes and looked again, opened the door, it wasn't there anymore.
Ghosty has their typical hangout. They are always seen in this area. As for who these spirits are, Fire Chief Mark Wyatt says there are a few theories.
The only thing I can think of is there was a fire chief that killed himself quite a few years ago, but he didn't kill himself in the fire hall. The little girl could have been a victim of something, and maybe we took her in an ambulance and she passed away years ago or something like that. I don't know.
Cappy says he often hears footsteps at night when he's alone in the hall.
It was like about a month after I started 5 years ago. There was footage of things on this chalkboard that just fell off. We caught it on that camera right there, and I don't know what happened to the footage.
The team has thought about using infrared technology to locate the ghosts. But if the paranormal activity lacked body heat, it could be tricky.
Yeah, I expect to see it again. I just don't know when. And try not to run out next time.
While the team isn't crying boo-hoo just yet, the likelihood of crossing paths with a ghost makes for just another day in the office. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Rankin Inlet.
Indigenous poets now have an outlet to share their work in front of crowds in Edmonton. Here's Chris Stewart at their first open mic night.
But sing for the gift of love, because we all have it and it's vaster than the sky above.
Kelly Lalakwa founded the Edmonton chapter of the Indigenous Poets Society this month. So she was surprised to see over 100 people come out for their first open mic night.
It started off just as a community event, wanting to open up a space for different Indigenous artists to come and share their work, share their words, their stories.
She says all of the proceeds will go to support the Wet'suwet'en justice camps in British Columbia who are fighting against the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
I dream of an old turtle island, an impossible utopia. A place where water lives from glaciers to oceans, sustaining all of our relations.
Several poets took to the stage to read their stories. Ty Thundering Antlers is angry with how he sees Mother Earth being abused for profit.
My anger stems from the deliberate actions of the people who created residential schools, the deliberate actions of resource extraction companies, and the deliberate actions of politicians, Canadian politicians, and also some Indigenous politicians to allow extra activism to occur on these lands.
The headliner was singer Chickwees, who says she enjoyed the opportunity to talk and tell stories from her new album instead of sing.
Since it's a poetry event, I am going to be doing a spoken word piece in Cree, and then I'll obviously provide the English portion as well. And then I'm going to go into a song that's called Dancing in the Northern Lights, and I do that partially in English and then in Cree. And that song is about, is an honor to missing and murdered Indigenous women.
The Society plans to have Indigenous Poetry Night every last Monday of each month here at the Aviary on 111 Avenue. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
The sky's the limit. That's the message dozens of youth heard at a special event in Winnipeg. Astronaut John Harrington shared his experience as the first Indigenous person to make it to space. Brittany Hobson was there.
When I was 8 years old, I used to sit in a cardboard box and dream I was going to the moon. In the 1960s,
more than 30 years later, John Harrington's dream became a reality. Well, almost. In 2002, Harrington didn't quite make it to the moon, but he arrived at the International Space Station. He's the first Indigenous NASA astronaut to reach space.
I have a chance to go out and share my story with kids that never had a role model in this position. That's not what I set out to do. When I came to NASA and they said, you're the first Indigenous astronaut, I found I had an opportunity to fulfill a role that I take very seriously.
Harrington shared his story with dozens of youth during a conference in Winnipeg. He spent a total of 13 days in space in 2002, where he took his tribe's flag as well as a feather gifted to him by an elder. Harrington is a member of the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma. Growing up, his parents pushed him to pursue a career in aviation. He didn't see many other Indigenous people in the industry. He says that's changing now, but more work needs to be done.
The issue probably is, are there role models in the field of what you want to do? You start looking at the Indigenous community, there are a lot of very successful engineers and scientists and mathematicians and lawyers, that do you have an opportunity to interact with those kind of people?
Leilani Henderson attended the conference with a handful of her classmates. And while she dreams of a career in the arts, she says it's inspiring to see Indigenous role models.
It's really cool to see that since I'm Indigenous as well. It's really cool to see someone like part of my culture, like someone I can look up to or my siblings can look up to, so they can know that they could also do things as well.
Harrington left NASA in 2005. In 2007, he rocketed into a new career as a motivational speaker, sharing his story with youth across the continent. Part of that includes nurturing others' dreams.
They recognize that, hey, that guy is no different than I am. If he can achieve something like that, why can't I? What did it take for him to do that, and who helped him do that? So if they can walk away with this feeling of empowerment, that's something they can accomplish, be it this or another career, that's a good thing.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
That's all the news I have for you this Saturday. You can always find more on our website, aptnnews.ca. Thanks for joining me. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I'll see you back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.